Hello, and welcome to AmpliFund training. In today's training, we are going to go over how to create and enter an expense, how to create and enter a reporting period, and how to create and enter a payment request. In AmpliFund, once you're logged in, we'll go to Grant Management, Grant. And this will bring up your active award. Select your award, and it'll bring you to the default award details page. Here we're going to go to the award dashboard, select post award, financial, and then expenses. At this point, AmpliFund expense setup is a little run filter, excuse me, that you can choose time frame, choose type of grant, choose the category, and even choose a specific line item. So if you're looking to see if any expenses have been completed or entered into the system, this is the way to do it. If you don't change anything, you leave it all blank, you just hit run, it'll pull up every expense that's been entered into the system to date for your project period. And as you can see, there's a handful that have been entered already. We're going to use those in the reporting period section. So that'll help us create a larger pool to build a reporting period from. You need to create an expense. What we want you to do is try and build your expenses in AmpliFund as close to when you receive them in your organization. If you know that it's part of your award that you will be claiming reimbursement on, we would like you to load it into AmpliFund at the time you receive it. The reason for that is because the reporting periods are based on the dates throughout your project period, and it will help to make sure that you have good grant management within the expense itself. One of the other reasons, as we go into this create button here, is that you will be able to scan and upload your attachments for that expense. So if you get an invoice for contracted service, or you're paying a utilities bill, or you're making a payroll payment, then those attachments are already in and assigned to the expense. So when you go to your reporting period, all of that work is done already, and now you're just reviewing your expenses that you want to claim for that reporting period and move forward that way. So your grant award should auto-populate. We're going to select a category. We're going to do some fringe benefits. And then the line item, in this specific example, is just advocate fringe. And then we're going to put in the direct cost amount. We don't have that. Well, I've created a little list of some expenditures that we can pull up. And we're going to look at this expense here for employer tax contributions as $338.20. We'll identify the expense date when you incurred the expense. We will say that this will be paid out on Friday, which will be 8/27/2021. Expense status always is left new. Then you can select your payee, who's paying this. So this is payroll, other, and you have a staff member, and you can leave your little note in here as to what this is for. This list here is built from this create new link that I'm hovering over right here. And this is how you can add the lists of vendors that you pay. It's a good tool to help keep track of where your expenditures are coming from and what payments you're making yourself as an organization. I'm going to click the Financials tab, and here's where your match comes into play. So for the expenditure that we are loading, it will have a cash match. You can select either a percentage or a dollar, if you know the dollar amount that equals 20%, or you can just hit 0.2 like you would on an Excel spreadsheet. The tab button on your keyboard works to move out to a different cell in here, and as you can see, the cash match line populated at 20%, and it also took the total direct cost of $338.20 and provided you the amount of what 20% of the match is. Here in this match amount box, as well as the match amount field right below the grant funded amount. Gives you an idea there. What we're asking awardees to do is to provide their documentation for each expense at the expense level. This works in AmpliFund in a multitude of ways, and as we get through the other two pieces today, you'll kind of see how they all link together. So we're going to select attachments, choose a field, and we'll bring up the payroll expense, and we'll select this payroll summary, as well as the timesheets. So you have the payroll summary and the timesheets that you can use. Verify everything in the Generals tab and click Create. Once you've created your expense for the Advocate Fringe, follow along this line here. You can kind of see everything that's brought out. It shows your match, shows the amount that you're claiming for the entirety of the expense. Also identifies the payee. As you can see, we have some missing information. You can go to edit this expense. And this was rent. We'll select payee. Well, we don't have the rent, the landlord in here. So we'll add him, say landlord. And click Save. Now it populates in the payee side. One of the nice things, and we'll go back into this expense here, is you can build your GL accounts and add it to your line item when you're editing or when you're creating your expense. And that'll be in a future training that we'll go through. So that's how you create and enter an expense in AmpliFund. All right, now we're going to move into the next step of the training, and that is how to create and enter a reporting period in AmpliFund. Again, we'll go to the grant management, grants. That should populate your grant list of awards from MBCC. Select the award that you want to enter and create a reporting period for, post-award, management, reporting periods. As you can see, there's a few different reporting periods already in here from some previous testing that we've done. We want to build a reporting period. Simply go to the upper right-hand corner and hit the Create button. And it's going to ask you a couple questions that you want to just verify the type of reporting period. Yes, this is the correct award that we want to do the reporting period for. And we want to create an expenditure or an expenses reporting period. So we'll select the expenses. And then we select the time period that we want to report on. And as you see from this list, it's very similar to what you've seen with MBCC in the past, based on your project period for your award, and based on the quarterly reporting approach that we assign in the settings, AmpliFund breaks out the reporting period that you need to create here for your grant award. So we'll select this project period and click Save. So once you go into or click Save, it brings you into the reporting period screen. A couple of things to look at in the reporting period, and one is you'll see that it says expenses and achievements, but we only selected the expenses reporting period. So that's why it's in green, and you have a little cannot do this sign that pops up here on achievements. What we're looking at is some key specifics. The start and end date of this reporting period here cannot be edited. Your reporting period will always be based on the start and end date from the reporting periods that are automatically broke out in AmpliFund based on your settings that we have your agency on in AmpliFund for a quarter or a month. As we come through the report here, we're going to go through the overall expense area. This is going to talk about the total award amount. And as you can see, this is the total expense amount for the period. Right now it says 0. And you're probably thinking, well, that can't be right. I just entered a whole bunch of expenses. This section right here, the number of unreviewed expenses, is the number of expenses that the system is looking at back in the expense section for this specific reporting period. These 4 items fall in this time frame that need to be reviewed by you. I'll show you how we can do that. Just simply click the hyperlink, and it brings you back to expenses. You'll notice there's a couple different things here in the expense section, and that is the time frame is custom now because it's looking specifically at the time period for the quarter that you are submitting or going to be closing your reporting period on. You can still select a category and select a line item for specific expenses you want to see, but with this filter for the quarterly reporting period, it's going to look at that time period if you just hit run, and it'll pull up those 4 expenses. And now you see the 4 expenses that are in the reporting period that section said it was 4 unreviewed expenses. What you need to do is edit each expense and change the expense status from new to reviewed. Now in this section, some organizations might have a different person that enters expenses versus the person that reviews the expenses in the reporting period. And that's an internal control thing at each organizational level where you would decide what needs to work best for your organization. But when you review the expense, you change it from new to reviewed. If it's a different person, you want to go through and look at everything, check the financials, make sure your 20% or your dollar, and it's in the right match column if it's cash or in kind. And you want to check to make sure your attachments are up. In the expense line, we didn't have this link. When we're looking at it from the reporting period piece, the link is now active. So we can highlight it, or sorry, select it, bring it up. And if you're reviewing it, you can look at the attachment for the expense. It's a good way to double check to verify if you didn't enter the wrong document for your expense. Everything looks good. Hit save. And now you'll notice your expense status changed from new to reviewed. And we're going to go back to the reporting period and show you what changed in the reporting period. Now, this time you won't have to create the reporting period because it's right here, 7/1. And it'll tell you it's a budget reporting period, which is the expense. We have 3 unreviewed expenses instead of 4. As we go through this for the reporting period, the funding will start loading into total amount of expenses for the period. Come back here to expenses, hit the run, and now we'll go through and review the other 3 expenses. Once we have all the expenses now in a reviewed status, when we go back to the post-award reporting period or the budget, it should load all 4 items. Okay. So when you have 0 reviewed and the amount is correct, come down here and you look at your category name, the budgeted amount, and what's being requested. And if everything is good for you, you can hit close. And I know that seems odd, but this actually closes the reporting period and moves your expenses to a closed status from a reviewed status. At this point, you cannot touch those expenses unless someone at MBCC opens your reporting period back up for you. We're going to go ahead and close this reporting period. Before we do that, you can also hit save. If you find yourself working on it and get pulled away, just hit save and you can always come back to it and work on it. I'm going to close this. And it even tells you cannot make any further expenses included in this period. Tracking period was successfully saved. And here is your reporting period. Click on the reporting periods on the upper left-hand corner of the award dashboard. It'll bring you back to your reporting period list. So from here, you can see that your status is closed. This reporting period is done. And you can also go to make a payment request from this link. However, we are going to go there a different way once we start the create and submit a payment request portion of the training. All right. Now we are going to begin training portion for creating and submitting a payment request. To grant management, go back to your grant list of awards. Select the award you want to create the payment request from. Go to your post-award tab in your dashboard. Cash flow payment requests. Again, you'll see some from our testing. Yours should be blank. When you want to create a payment request, hit the plus sign in the upper right-hand corner. And here's the payment request form. Now, with the payment request name, what we are asking you to do is to type in the award ID number from your award, and we can go back in, just cancel out of this real quick. See this information. In your award details page, you will see a line that says award ID number. Award identification number, MT01-980. So when we're doing our payment request for the name, we're asking you to put your award ID number in, followed by the quarter or the period in which you're requesting reimbursement. So it'll look something like this, MT01-980, quarter ending 9/30/2021. And the date created, you can put today's date, or in the date in which you expect to submit it down here. Now here's the first section in AmpliFund where you start linking your reporting periods to your payment request. And this is where I was explaining earlier how having the documentation at the expense level, which with each individual expense you request, will allow us to go back and see. So this is the reporting period we are going to request payment from. A couple things to note before I identify this amount, and that is your net costs, your total. We're going to select this, $250, and it's going to load your match contribution from when you put it into at the expense level. Asking you not to add any additional expenses in your financial details because they will not bring in the documentation that it will be needed. Basically, by putting the documentation at the expense level within AmpliFund, you keep all of your documentation with your expenses that you're claiming your reimbursement for when you enter it. And so when you build your reporting period, you don't have to go back and look for all of those documents. But at the same time, it also keeps your reimbursement request cleaner. You don't have to have a whole bunch of documents added here or in the reporting period. Everything looks good. We just come down here, put in the magical number that you're requesting, a net total of 200, and hit submit. Now, at this point in time, your payment request has been sent to MBCC for review. And what your MBCC financial person and program person will be doing will be reviewing your reporting period that we have a link to here, as well as reviewing your payment request. Again, if we're looking at expenses, we're just coming right here. Running our list, and we've got 1 closed, 3 reviewed. Well, wait a minute, that's not right. How do we get those into the reporting period? Well, we have to change this time frame. So we'll have to make another reporting period. I can show you, I'll show you how to do that right now. Post award. reporting period. This is also good if you get an expenditure that happens during the reporting period but isn't showing, or you forgot to add it to your list of expenditures. So we'll create another expenditure. And you'll notice here that there's only 3 to choose from. And that's because you have one already done. So this will track what reports you still need to complete and which ones should have been completed or closed. So it's saying for this period, we have one expense during this time frame. Now we're looking at, we're in October and December, hit run. We only have the one expense that shows up, still in a new status. It was for employee travel. We're going to open up this start date back to the beginning of the grant. August should do it. Now we have all of these expenses to put in our reporting period. Go ahead and review this one. Now we should see that expenditure in the reporting period. And there it is. That's how you add an expense to a future reporting period that should have been in your first one. And as you go throughout the period, you'll want to just remember you have to have that expense loaded. So sometimes it is good to change this time frame to the start of the grant to make sure that expenses that have been loaded were requested in reimbursement. That concludes the training for creating and updating an expense, creating and submitting a reporting period, and creating and submitting a payment request. Thank you.